Hello and welcome to the Chapter 5, Section 1 video on the science of heredity. I'm Mrs. Erling, and with me today are Mrs. Kim and Mr. Knox. You should have your textbook open to pages 118 to 122 to help you while you're taking notes. Our essential question for this video is, how are traits passed from parents to offspring? So the material you're learning on this video for this section centers around one man, Gregory Mendel, and he is known as the father of genetics. So who is Gregory Mendel? Well, he is a mid-19th century monk from Europe, and he studied pea plants. And while he was growing them, he wondered why some had different characteristics than others. Why some were tall and some were short, and some of the beans looked different.
Okay, so before we talk more about Gregory Mendel and his observations, let's talk about some important words you need to know. Heredity is an important word. It's the passing of characteristics or traits from one offspring to another, from the parent to their offspring. Trait is the actual characteristic, like your height, your skin color, hair color, eye color, having freckles, so forth. And genetics is a scientific study of heredity. Okay, discuss what traits you may have inherited from your mother and father. Okay, so back to Gregory Mendel. He studied pea plants, and he knew that pea plants are self-pollinating because they have both male and female reproductive structures. And he didn't want them to self-pollinate. So what he did was he started with purebred plants. Purebred means that they were the same generation after generation. And he took the purebred tall pea plant and purebred short pea plant, and he crossed them together. He put the pollen and the ovule together. And in the next generation, he noticed that they were all tall, all of the offsprings. They weren't medium, they weren't short, they were all tall. And he thought that was very interesting. And then he took these tall plants and bred them again. And then in the second generation, he noticed that for every 3 tall ones, there was 1 short one. So the shortness that had not been there in the F1 generation returned in the F2 generation. He did this with many different characteristics, such as pod color, pod shape, wrinkled, smooth, and every single time he did this, the ratio was 3:1. Okay, so right now, if you could pause the video and summarize what Mendel did with his experiments with the pea plants.
All right, this chapter is different than other chapters because there's a lot of vocabulary, words that you have not heard about and you will need to know. Well, 2 of the words here, gene. Gene is a factor that controls a trait, and allele. Alleles are different forms of a gene. Well, let's take something you know, a human being. The gene would be a cleft chin. You might call it the butt chin. That's the gene, and you would have 2 forms of that gene. You might have one from your mom that says, hey, you will have the cleft chin, and you might get one from the dad that says, hey, you will not. And usually one will win out, one will not win out. So keep in mind, you have 2 alleles, 1 allele from mom, 1 allele from dad. Sometimes they say the same thing, and you get that. Sometimes your mom gives you different instructions, and your dad gives you different instructions, and you have to choose one of those. And how you choose is you will always choose the dominant one. And the word dominant means to win out. If you were dominant in a fight, you would always win. Okay, so you would always choose the dominant one. Sometimes the dominant one will come from mom, sometimes the dominant one will come from dad. Or another way to put it, sometimes the dominant one will come from the egg, and sometimes the dominant one will come from the sperm. Exact same thing in plants. Plants don't have butt chins, but they have different seed shapes. You wrinkled and a sphere. They have different seed colors, flower colors, pod shapes, pod colors, flower positions, and stem height. Now, what Gregory Mendel found out in his experiments is that there was a dominant allele in these pea plants. And through math, and we're going to talk about this later on, and Mrs. Kim talked about the ratios, through math he realized that the dominant allele was, for each of these, like for flower color, the dominant allele was purple. So when the pea plant was given a choice, a white flower or a purple flower, it always chose the purple flower. Okay, now how did you get white flowers? Well, the only way a white flower would come up is if the egg gave an instruction for a white flower and the sperm gave instruction for a white flower. Then there's no choice. You have to take the white flower. So keep those words in mind as well as those definitions. All right. In your notes, make sure you guys describe what an allele is and explain the difference between a dominant and allele a dominant allele and a recessive allele. Okay, you guys should have taken those notes. And Gregory Mendel's work was very significant. However, it wasn't significant at that time. It took many, many years to realize how important this work was. And today we use a lot of Gregory Mendel's work for the DNA and genetics that we know today. It's the foundation of genetics, and that's the future of science. And knowing what DNA is, knowing what your DNA can hold. And this is in the news today. Angelina Jolie had her DNA examined, and it showed that she might have the possibility of getting breast cancer. So she took steps among herself to get a double mastectomy. So DNA is very important, and like I said, it's going to be the future of science. So, and Gregory Mendel started it all.